In January 2026, a court quietly reopened what could become the largest compulsory refund in American history. More than $150 billion could go back into the pockets of companies, and nobody is paying attention. This is not a prediction. This is not a theory. It is a real process, already underway and with explosive potential. While newspapers talk about elections, celebrities, and empty controversies, the United States Supreme Court is about to decide whether Trump's tariffs were illegal. And if they are, that changes everything. If you think this has nothing to do with your life, think again. These fees are embedded in the price of everything you buy, from breakfast to the rental truck that delivers your groceries. 100% of the burden fell on the consumer, but now the money may return, only this time to the big funds. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this decision could trigger silent fiscal chaos, how it directly affects your cost of living, and why small businesses are being swallowed up in this process. This has happened before, and those who understood in time got ahead. The warning that almost no one is noticing. There's a silent battle raging behind the scenes of the American financial system. And while the public focuses on political scandals and election squabbles, the United States government may be about to be forced to return more than $150 billion. That's right, billions. And the scariest part? Almost no one noticed. The reason is a legal process that at first glance seems technical. But behind the acronyms and legal terms lies the dismantling of a mechanism that sustained the government's cash flow for almost a decade. Trump's tariffs. Tariffs that, despite being disguised as economic protection, were in practice an indirect tax on the average citizen. The detail that almost no one notices? These tariffs were passed on entirely to the consumer, raising food prices, the cost of living, and creating hidden inflation that most people still don't understand. Meanwhile, hedge funds and importers are quietly organizing to demand refunds. You didn't see this on the news because that's exactly how the game is played. First, a silent cost is imposed on the population. Then, large economic groups sue the government and get their money back. The consumer paid, the funds win, the cycle repeats. The most unsettling thing is this. This reimbursement could come at a time when government coffers are at their weakest, fueling a new wave of fiscal instability. This isn't theory, it's already happening. And if you think this story will end up in court, you're mistaken. This is where everything starts to change. This is just the first domino. In the following sections, you will understand how the Supreme Court became the epicenter of an invisible crisis, and why seemingly technical decisions have the power to explode the system from within. Why the Supreme Court matters more than it seems. Most people associate the Supreme Court solely with ideological issues, abortion, guns, marriage. But what almost no one realizes is that the court's most impactful decisions are economic, not moral. And one of them is about to shake the foundations of the American tax system. What is at stake now is the legality of the tariffs imposed between 2018 and 2020, known as the Trump tariffs. The central argument? That these tariffs were applied without due process and without clear approval from Congress, violating clauses of the Constitution itself. It may sound technical, but here's the point. If the Supreme Court rules that these tariffs were unconstitutional, the United States government may be legally obligated to reimburse companies that paid them in recent years. We're talking about $150 billion at stake, but there's more. Hundreds of companies have already filed lawsuits demanding this reimbursement. Some of them sold the right to reimbursement to specialized funds, which are now only waiting for the final decision to withdraw the money. It's as if they were buying a winning lottery ticket at a discount, a ticket that the Supreme Court could validate at any moment. And if that happens, a new precedent will be set. From that ruling onward, any tariff imposed without legal rigor could be retroactively challenged. What seems like a legal victory for some companies could turn into a fiscal time bomb for the government. This is the kind of decision that defines the course of money for decades. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't become a breakfast topic of conversation. But it changes the entire game. And the most dangerous part? In this case, the game may have already been played, and the public hasn't even realized it yet. In the next section, you will understand exactly where the billions are at risk and why this money, if it leaves the public coffers, could trigger a disguised fiscal collapse. Where exactly are the billions at risk? The number seems abstract, $150 billion. But this value isn't lost in some invisible fund. It's recorded in spreadsheets, embedded in products you've bought, and now it's being claimed. During the trade war years, thousands of American importers were forced to pay extra tariffs to bring in goods from China and other countries. These tariffs, often exceeding 20%, were collected directly at customs. And yes, they were passed on to the consumer. Now, hundreds of these companies have filed lawsuits. And here's the crucial point. They're not asking to cancel the fees going forward. They're asking for retroactive refunds. They want every dollar that was spent back with interest. And some don't even exist anymore. Funds have bought their legal rights, turning them into a financial asset. Do you understand what this means? We are facing a parallel market for court-ordered reimbursements traded as an investment product. Hedge funds buy fee rights from bankrupt companies, betting that the Supreme Court will approve the payment. And if that happens, they will pocket billions instantly. The risk is not theoretical. The government has already begun to provision for fiscal losses. Each approved refund represents fewer resources for health, infrastructure, and social programs. Furthermore, this mass return could completely unbalance public finances in an election year. The most frightening detail, there's no clear ceiling for these refunds. If this precedent is set, new waves of lawsuits could emerge, with companies demanding compensation for other similar tariffs. What amounts to $150 billion today could be $300 billion tomorrow, and after that, nobody knows. In the next section, you'll see how this movement can trigger a domino effect that impacts the entire American economy, and far beyond. The domino effect that could affect the entire economy. Imagine this scenario. Thousands of companies win in court. The government is forced to return hundreds of billions in collected fees, and suddenly, public cash flow collapses. Sounds like an exaggeration? It's not. This has happened before, in other formats with other words, but always with the same outcome. The first impact is fiscal. Reimbursing these fees means a direct hole in the federal budget. And when the government is forced to pay without having planned for it, it only has two options: either cut spending or print money. Both paths lead to the same place: economic chaos. But this chaos doesn't come with sirens. It comes in the form of higher prices, sudden increases in indirect taxes, subtle cuts in public services, and, above all, a silent acceleration of inflation. An inflation that is already present, but hidden in supermarket labels and everyday bills. And it doesn't stop there. Companies that were counting on predictable cash flow now need to provision for losses, redirect investments, and reduce staff. Small and medium-sized enterprises, which lack hedging and legal teams, could go bankrupt, overwhelmed by the collateral effects. Meanwhile, the funds profiting from the crisis are buying back devalued assets, expanding their influence and concentrating power. The collapse of tariffs is not just a technical error, it's the silent transfer of wealth from the people to the top of the pyramid. And it all began with a decision that seemed distant in the corridors of the Supreme Court. And here's the next point that almost no one is seeing. This decision could rewrite the legal rules of how public money is collected and returned. And that leads us directly to the detail they're not telling you. The detail they're not telling you. Amid billions at stake, there's a subtle but crucial detail that's going unnoticed by most. What the Supreme Court decides now won't just affect past tariffs. It will create a precedent, and precedents shape the future. They open doors that, once flung wide open, no one can close anymore. This case isn't just about refunds. It could redefine the limits of the government's taxing power. If these fees are deemed illegal, any tax imposed without a formal legislative process could be challenged, even years after it was applied. This completely changes the fiscal landscape. This is where things start to get dangerous. If the state loses predictability in revenue collection, it loses the basis of fiscal confidence. Governments function because companies believe that rules are clear. If every new tax becomes the target of retroactive litigation, legal uncertainty will scare away investment and stifle the real economy. And there's more. These decisions create jurisprudence for future disputes in other sectors. Health, environment, technology, digital commerce. Any area where the government has overstepped its power can now be challenged. The legal effect is slow but irreversible. What nobody tells you is that while this seems like a technical debate between lawyers and judges, the real battleground is the power to decide where the money goes. Today, the government decides. But if this precedent is confirmed, it will be the funds, the courts, and the law firms that decide. And when that happens, the average citizen is always last in line. In the next section, you'll understand how all of this, the fees, the decisions, and the refunds, is directly impacting your wallet, even if you've never heard of it before. How can this affect your wallet? You might think, but I don't import products, I don't sell to the government, I have nothing to do with this. But that's exactly the mistake most people make. The tariffs charged at American ports didn't stay there. They ended up in your grocery cart, your energy bill, your school tuition. Every indirect tax, like these tariffs, becomes a cost for companies, and every cost for companies is passed on in a cascading effect until it reaches you. Have food prices gone up? The reason might be a tariff embedded in transportation, fertilizer, or imported machinery that has become more expensive. Hidden inflation lies in the details. Now imagine that all that money charged to you is returned, but not to you. It goes to funds, offices, and companies that bought the legal rights. You paid the bill, but the reimbursement doesn't go back into your pocket. It goes to those who knew how to position themselves. This isn't an opinion, it's the rule of the game. Furthermore, when the government has to spend that money, guess where it will get it from? From the services you use, public health, social programs, infrastructure. And if it doesn't cut these expenses, it will do what it always does. print more money, and generate more inflation. The result? You lose twice. First, by paying fees disguised as patriotism. Then, by feeling the pinch of the return of funds to those who profit from the crisis. The system was designed to transfer value discreetly from the hands of the many to the hands of the few. And the most dangerous thing is that this isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern that repeats itself in cycles. And that's what we'll talk about in the next and final topic. A lesson that great empires ignored and paid dearly for. A lesson in financial wisdom, Solomon style. Solomon said, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." What is happening now behind the scenes of the American economy is nothing new. It's a recurring theme. The difference between winning and losing in this game is simple. Those who see it sooner are better protected. For centuries, empires grew by relying on the power to collect taxes without resistance. But when financial decisions become invisible, distant, and technical, the common people lose control, and the powerful take over. The same pattern repeated itself in Rome, in France, in Weimar Germany, and now in the United States. Today, the fee you pay doesn't come with a price tag. It's hidden in the price of rice, your car payment, your child's school fees. And when you dispute it, you get nothing back. The refund goes to whoever studied the rule, bought the loophole, and profited from the collapse. True financial wisdom lies not in predicting the future, but in understanding the mechanisms of the present. Because what seems distant today is what empties your pockets tomorrow. And when everything collapses, it's not for lack of warning, it's for excessive distraction. So the question remains, are you paying attention to the invisible decisions that define your purchasing power, your assets, and your financial freedom? Or are you letting others play that game for you? History is clear. Empires don't collapse for lack of power, but for overconfidence. When the United States government began imposing tariffs without solid justification, it seemed like just another political move. But now, years later, those decisions could cost hundreds of billions, and perhaps much more. And the most shocking thing, all of this happened without the public even realizing it. While people were paying more for food, cars, medicine, the funds were preparing to profit from the reimbursements. The machine turned in silence, but now the pattern has been revealed. And you have a choice. Ignore it or take a stand. Those who understand the game beforehand are better protected. Those who wake up in the middle of the crisis have already missed the best opportunities. So reflect, what else is happening right now? Invisible, technical, silent, that hasn't yet reached your pocket, but will. If you want to continue opening your eyes to the behind-the-scenes workings of money, politics, and power, subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and leave a like. The next video will show you why funds are buying productive land in the US like never before. And what does this say about the next food crisis?